Can I explain the difference between aggro and tempo? It's a tough one for sure. The lines have been so blurred. Typically speaking, if it's a true aggro deck, then it doesn't care about board control at all and just only goes face. So you got your Pirate Warrior, which just pretty much just every card in the deck goes face and you go face. And then you got your tempo decks, which care about board control and being ahead on the board to win the game. So Zoo, for example, most of the time, the current builds of Zoo, if they don't have board control, they can't do any damage. They don't really have too much out-of-hand damage. So it's more tempo-oriented. And they really want to hold the board and get advantages off the board rather than just playing Chargers going face and hoping it works out. Face Hunter is an aggro deck for sure because they just go face. And they don't care about board control. Like Wolf Rider is a very aggro card. Aggro Shaman tends to get board control and trade a reasonable amount though too, right? Depends what matchup you're talking about, but most of the time, yeah. There's no crackles in it anymore, so it has to be more board-centric. People cut the Ancestral Knowledges for 5/5 taunts, which force it to be more board-centric. So you could make an argument that it's a tempo deck. You could make an argument that almost every aggro deck is a tempo deck, especially when you play an aggro deck against an aggro deck, because when you're playing an aggro deck against an aggro deck, you have to play tempo style. So it's the same fucking thing. Like, aggro and tempo are basically the same thing. There's not too much difference. But of course you're gonna have the Hearthstone schnabs that'll be just like, no, it's tempo because of this, and it's just like, shut up, dude. Tempo is when you play a lot of stuff suddenly in one turn. Yeah, it's the same thing in Hearthstone. Tempo turn. Like, the definition of tempo is basically the measure of how much crap you have on the board. So for example, like tempo execute's a phrase you hear a lot, and the reason why it's called a tempo execute is because you're not getting the most value out of the card, but you're preserving something on board. So it's called a tempo execute because you're just forcing yourself to have the maximum possible amount of minions on the board instead of getting the most value out of your card. So tempo in both card games mean basically the same thing. It's a deck called, if it's burned and nothing else, as aggro, man. Face Hunter. Burn deck. You could also call it. I don't know, man. I'm not the main guy that comes up with naming for things. Just whatever the deck does, probably just call it that. If it gets tempo, call it a tempo deck. If it goes face the whole time, call it an aggro deck. If it burns you the whole time, call it a burn deck. Keep it simple. Reconnected with nature. I don't know. I just needed to get away. People were just telling me about how unlucky I was, and I was like, look, guys, I get it.